What is up, everyone? Welcome in Makeshift Managers Podcast. As always, I am Austin. That is Devin. And below me is Conan. You may not know Conan. You may know Conan. Conan, welcome in.
Thank you. Always love to chop it up about football and especially free agency. Today, there's a lot of, maybe insignificant moves to most people, but I think as, people that really look at every player on every team that's fantasy impacted, I think there'll be some stuff to talk about. I really dug deep on some of these guys, especially signed today. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, the burning question of every signing: how does this affect Amon-Ra St. Brown? But let's just get into it, Conan. I'll let you start. You talked about a lot of signings today, so go ahead and start one that happened today.
Yeah, I think let's start with. I don't know if it'll be the most impactful for their team, but I do imagine he's walking into a pretty nice spot, and that's tight end Dalton Schultz. We know him as, kind of a security blanket for Dak over the last few years, kind of been propelled by his target volume. He's just been, getting peppered with no true wide receiver 2 there alongside CD. But what did you guys think of that signing in terms of, do you think he's going to get a lot of targets? Like, do you think that he's someone that obviously they only gave him a 1-year deal, but it can be worth up to $9 million. And he's still, I don't know how old he is actually, but relatively young.
26.
Yeah, in the tight end landscape. So, I think most people would think that the Cowboys were the best landing spot for him. And the ideal place for him to be the most fantasy valuable. But in terms of somewhere where he's going to just likely walk into a ton of targets, I think the Texans is a pretty good spot for that, honestly. What do you guys think?
Austin, go ahead. This is one of your guys that you have to say goodbye to, so I'll let you have the first word on Dalton.
This is one of my boys indeed. He's probably getting the ball from Bryce Young, most likely at this point. So a good safety blanket for a rookie coming in. He is probably going to walk into a lot of targets. Who knows? He is competing with the likes of Robert Woods, Nico Collins, and Noah Brown. So the Texans just taking everybody.
Hopefully John Mechie. Hopefully John Mechie is back.
Hopefully,
But yeah, no, you're not wrong. It's a bare receiving core there.
But it's good for Dalton. It's a proof. Most of these 1 years are prove it deals to see what he can do outside of a top 5 offense that's been run by Kellen Moore the last 5 years or however long he's been there. And he's going to get an upgrade at quarterback over Davis Mills. He doesn't have a lot, Brevin Jordan is below him, so he's going to be the tight end 1. It's really just for him to get some targets, make some money, probably get a bigger deal somewhere else. Because, like you said, the best landing spot for him was Dallas. But we don't really know what Dallas is going to do with the rest of their money. They have about $12 million in cap, and they say they could bring Zeke back on the lesser deal. But, Dallas always has used their tight ends well. They have Peyton Hendershot and, the other guy is, it's escaping me.
Jake Ferguson?
Jake Ferguson, thank you. And, since Jason Witten, it's kind of been like these weird white guys who have just been in the tight end spot for Dallas, and they keep turning into security blankets. Mm-hmm. So Dallas has always used their tight ends well. So let's see what Schultz can do outside of, like I said, a top 5 offense. But I think he'll do fine. It's good for the Texans. They're not making a big splash because they're not really going to go anywhere. They'll probably get another top 10 pick next year. But hey, they could win 4 to 5 games maybe next year if Bryce Young is exactly what they want him to be.
Yeah. The AFC South still sucks regardless of how the Jags finish the season. The Jags are the best team in that division, and everybody else is clinging on to dear hope. It's why effectively all 3 of the teams besides Jacksonville are searching for their future quarterback. Dalton Schultz is really cool. I like it. He's going to be the number 1 target until the draft comes around. and they take a wide receiver, I'm assuming, after they get their quarterback. Who knows? They might just take another tight end and say, you know what, Dalton, congrats. You're now going to be one of the best tandems of tight ends since Bill Belichick ran his guys in the early 2010s. I think Schultz is going to see a uptick in his targets, at least his target percentage in the offense, because who else are you going to throw to? Robert Woods, while he is a consummate pro, is not the same receiver we saw in Los Angeles. Nico Collins has not arrived yet. I don't think this season he will truly arrive. I think he's going to be a solid wide receiver too. For fantasy, I'm not going to really pay the price to grab him, but I don't know. It all depends. Everything's relative. I think their defense is going to be interesting moving forward because the Texans are young, effectively. For me, another Texan that got signed today was actually super interesting because the bane of my existence in fantasy running back land was Devin Singletary. You never knew where to draft him, and you never knew when to start him. Congratulations, Dameon Pierce. You are now in a running back carousel. So Schultz is going to be the de facto one until somebody comes in. If Mechie can play starting the season, I think he's going to slot in as an upside wide receiver too for this offense, just due to his athleticism since the last time we saw him. But Schultz is getting paid a good amount of money for 1 year of football. This will be a fun little detour. So I don't think he's going to be here long term, but he can prove to us if he's going to be Austin Hooper or Jimmy Graham, basically. Are you just the product of the system and offense that you were a part of, or is your talent transcendent of just Dak Prescott and the Cowboys?
Yeah, and like kind of looking into the numbers, I do think we're probably likely leaning on the side of product of the system and just like the sheer volume of targets he was getting and kind of just being close with Dak. So and that's kind of what I saw, especially like if you look at the numbers, nothing really popped off to me because everything was kind of right where I expected. You know, most efficiency and opportunity metrics were telling me he's right between 10th and 20th in among tight ends. And that sounds pretty much like what I expected. You know, he's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you look at kind of what some of his, like, you know, he had the 6th most air yards among tight ends, and he was top 10 in targets, target share, target rate. So like, if anything, it's actually, you know, you kind of look at that and say he had a lot of opportunity and he wasn't actually even producing as well as you would hope with that type of opportunity. So again, I think we come back to likely just a guy, and he might have a good season with, you know, 100 targets. There's the opportunity to have that, but likely not going to be something that turns into, you know, oh my God, the next great tight end. So I'm right there with you guys in terms of that.
Yeah, I think he could finish top 10 in PPR. It's not saying a lot, to be honest, but Cooper Rush was the starter for 5 weeks, and Dalton Schultz was non-existent during that time. Dalton missed a game after that, and, you know, 577 yards, 5 touchdowns, all, you know, much lower. He had a great 2021 with 808 yards and 8 touchdowns. So back in top 10 finish for a tight end. It's not the worst tight end to roster on your fantasy lineup, but I mean, if you're not rostering Pitts, Kelsey, or Andrews, this is probably one of your next best guys after Goddard and Hawkinson.
I'd even take Ingram over
at this point. Yeah,
I think Schultz is going to be that back end. Basically, if you're going to punt tight end until like the later rounds, if he's there, you take him. But I think there's going to be some tight ends that are going to be rookies coming in this year that I would take over Schultz. Because the biggest thing with Schultz was the upside, because especially after Amari Cooper got traded, there was just a target volume that was just kind of left to the side with an injured Michael Gallup coming back and really nobody else in line to be fielding targets. So the volume should be there for Dalton Schultz. I don't know if the production will be there for many people in the Texans offense. It's the first year under a new system. It's going to be a rookie quarterback. The best thing about the franchise so far has been Laramie Tunsil breaking every offensive tackle contract record he can. But beyond that, it's a very young team that I don't think truly has an identity moving into this year, which is why you get the quarterback and then everything else. And you can see it in their sheet from the offseason. It's a lot of one-year deals, and there's a point to that. They're throwing stuff at the wall, and if it sticks, they're going to pay some guys. But at this point, they don't have to invest in anybody besides the guy they're hoping to draft it to.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely checks out. Like, it's like a little, tryout. It's like, you do
Mhm.
well this year, we'll give you that bigger payday that you want. But
Exactly.
we gotta see it first. And I mean, I think ultimately there are a lot of other places Dalton Schultz could have gone that actually would have cratered his value.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and right now, I don't think he's gonna slip like that many spots from where, we had him as a Cowboy.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think in the end, not it's a pretty solid, one of the best landing spots he could have in terms of that opportunity. Um, so no, it'll be fun to kind of see how that plays out, what other weapons they'll add, like you were saying, Devin. And so they're not going to walk in with Robert Woods wide receiver one. I would be shocked.
Well, this
Just
makes me
draft
kind of
Kelsey
like
in the first round and don't worry about it.
this
Yeah.
the whole Dalton Schultz signing today really puts into perspective another player that moved so far this offseason at the tight end position that I think the value is going to be really weird at the start. Darren Waller's a New York Giant. That feels like one of the worst outcomes for him in terms of his overall output out of any team. Because the thing with Darren Waller is he's going to an offense that could not throw the ball last year consistently due to the lack of weapons. He slots in currently as their best perimeter weapon, which should lean him to be an absolute stud at tight end. But in the same vein, I've never seen Daniel Jones do what he just did twice. And even at Daniel Jones's peak, is he really a 4,000 yard, 30 touchdown guy, or is he going to be 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns? And if they're going to be adding a guy in the draft on the perimeter, how much usage will a guy like Darren Waller truly get in this offense? Because the biggest thing for him in Vegas and Oakland, his top years, was he was the number one guy in offenses that didn't really have the best weapons around him. So he became the de facto one in certain seasons.
I really wanted Daniel Bellinger to be good, and this distorts his value, and it makes me sad.
Did you actually see that story about his father? There was a Austin's looking at me like, what? No.
No, yeah, I did not hear this.
After Waller got traded to the Giants, someone wrote an article about how Waller is, great and is better than Bellinger is already, which I think is a fair statement considering how raw and inexperienced he is. Even though he showed some great potential last year, I think. That eye injury was one of the most brutal things that I remember seeing. But so anyway, after that story got posted that Waller was better than Bellinger, Mr. Bellinger, his dad actually tweeted and DM'd the journalist that wrote the article and was like berating him and like mad at him about calling his son worse than Darren Waller. And it kind of went viral, and I was cracking up. But like, that's such a classic dad move.
My man,
it's just like sticking up for your son. You gotta.
Trade my son. Get him out of there. Send him to Dallas.
It's supposed to be the Danny to Danny connection, dude.
Double Danny squared, if you will.
I completely get that point though, in terms of like what he's walking into, and you'd rather have Derek Carr throwing you the ball than a Daniel Jones. I do think though, like he's walking into, like you said, like kind of being that number one target. And I mean, maybe the team kind of views him as like, okay, we're not going to really put you in line and like a traditional like we're just going to use you as, like a glorified slot or like just kind of a wide receiver, not really like a traditional tight end. And so, I mean, I was just looking at, they did have the second lowest target share for tight ends last year. But really, it's like, if you're going to add someone like that, you expect that to definitely go up a little bit. But that it's going to be interesting. It looks like they actually threw the least amount of targets overall as well, even though they were only second.
Well, didn't Saquon Barkley get like 98% of the targets?
I do think
a ridiculous number.
The biggest saving grace for me is there are far worse places Darren Waller could have been. And I do think the upside for him in New York is actually weirdly better than what he had going in Vegas. It just seemed like the wheels had fallen off, whether it be health or just overall continuity with the team. Brian Daboll really kind of put Dawson Knox on the map for his first couple of years in fantasy. And if there's one person that I think can get the most out of the weapons at his disposal, it is Brian Daboll. So I don't know how to really price Darren Waller in fantasy coming this next year, because I think the upside's baked in based upon the overall usage we're going to see. And if he's healthy, I really look forward to seeing him possibly get back to that, like, bordering 1,000 yards per season. And I think due to his size, he could be a huge red zone threat for them.
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of these guys that's kind of polarizing, where, you know, half the people I think are on the side of this is good because he's automatically the number one receiving weapon, and then you have another group of people thinking, okay, but he just went to the Giants and he's going to be catching passes from Danny Dimes, and like, is that really good? So I think he's a good player to kind of send out some feelers on and just kind of see, you know, across any of your leagues. Just see how that manager is kind of feeling about him. I mean, are they on the side of, oh yeah, like, I'm pissed he just went to the Giants, like that's going to create, or maybe you throw out a low ball offer, see if it gets accepted. I think he certainly has that upside of being a top 3 tight end in a gross position and landscape. So why not?
We drafted him in a 2 quarterback, 2 tight end league. We got Waller in like the 5th round, and we were like, "Oh my god, this is the best value we've ever seen!" Like, me and Devin were losing our shit.
Yeah,
and then all season long we were like, "Oh no!"
Austin Knox scored a touchdown for the 3rd straight.
Yeah, we traded Dawson Knox straight up for Elijah Moore, and that worked out great for us because then we picked up Elijah Moore off waivers later.
Elijah
Felt
Moore
great.
forever in our hearts.
Well,
I want to talk about Mr. Carr.
Okay.
Now that he's a Saint, one of the earlier signings, but not so much about Carr, because Derek Carr is. We all know who Derek Carr is. He is who we thought he was, and now he's going into a place where he finished 17th last year overall, 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 picks. So the touchdowns pretty much are on the same what he's been doing. So now he has Michael Thomas, who scored 52 points in 3 games, which is an average of 15, 16 points. Not bad. And Chris Olave, who finished 25th last year in PPR, missing 2 games and having Andy Dalton all year long. I'm really off of Michael Thomas because he's older. He gets hurt a lot. But I want to just dive all in on Chris Olave. I feel like Derek Carr is leagues better than Andy Dalton. To set a bar very, very low, is leagues better than Andy Dalton. I think Chris Olave could finish top 10 in PPR next season with this. Now, with the caveat that I'm not too sure how to feel about Kamara yet, because Carr is good at dumping down when he was dumping down to Josh Jacobs, but Dennis Allen, I think, hates Alvin Kamara, and then Taysom Hill exists. So it's a weird ass offense that just has never made sense ever in our entire lives. But what do you guys think about the value of Olave overall, Michael Thomas overall? Maybe we can get into Kamara, but the whole suspension thing makes everything a little bit weird.
I mean, I love Olave and kind of those 2 weapons. I think especially even Michael Thomas, after what we haven't seen for the last 3 years, is someone that, is whoever has them completely out on them, sick of them after having them on their bench, on their IR slots for 3 straight years. Like, are they done? Like, okay, maybe you can kind of squeeze something out of it. Like, but I think, like you said, this is even though Derek Carr is, Derek Carr, he's still a massive upgrade over Andy Dalton. And I mean, if you look at the numbers, like I feel like every year he's pushing, near the top of the list for air yards, or I mean, for just total yards, but he just can't hit that touchdown total. And so you're hoping, he's got Olave, he's got Michael Thomas, they re-signed Juwan Johnson, like, he's got some weapons, and maybe they can kind of help him elevate that total a little bit. But we said that last year with Devontae, that didn't quite really come to fruition either in terms of his total touchdown passes. So, I mean, overall, I do think it's a good move. I mean, for them, it was their plan A, and it was a good plan A, because obviously they have a lot going on in terms of their cap space and stuff like that too. And I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see, like you said, about that Kamara. I think that's going to play a big part, kind of, especially in the beginning of the season where we're at with Olave and Michael Thomas.
Derek Carr's interesting. I'm always going to be a little biased towards the guy being a Chargers fan. I think he got a really raw deal out in Vegas. The Saints have been in the NFL's version of purgatory since Drew Brees' elbow decided to stop throwing passes. They're a very good team with very limited upside. And this move doesn't give them much more upside on top of what they had last year. I think it stabilizes their floor in a division where if you have the highest floor, you probably make the playoffs next season. I do think Derek Carr will be a good stabilizing factor for Chris Olave. If you get a fully healthy season out of this offense, I think Olave is going to be stellar just because of the skill set that he possesses. He's going to have to command a large target share in this offense, even if Michael Thomas is healthy. Adding Jamal Williams as well, I think, is tenfold to fielding a competent NFL team. We just saw Jamal Williams be the ultimate thorn in the side of my favorite running back, DeAndre Swift, for an entire season. So even if Kamara misses time, I think Jamal Williams might not get to 17 touchdowns again. But in terms of just red zone efficiency, he's one of the best backs you can have in the red zone over the last calendar year. Derek Carr, congrats on getting another massive contract. New Orleans, hopefully this go around with Derek Carr and Dennis Allen's better than the first time. It's the last time Dennis Allen coached Derek Carr. He was fired by season's end. Albeit it's a completely different situation. Chris Olave should be great. Derek Carr, still going to hold out hope that he can be great, but I have to see it from the guy. He's going to get you between 30, like about 3,800 to like 45 year over year. He's hovering around 4,000 yards. If he can finally get over 30 touchdowns consistently through the life of this contract, they're going to be a very competitive team. And that's not even mentioning the experience on the defensive end because of the way that they maneuver the cap. So I agree, Austin. I think Olave is going to be really good next year. I'd be surprised if he cracks the top 10 just because I'm not sure how many points this offense will score in total, like week by week. I'm not sure if it's going to be the type of offense where you have the one dominant figure. And I do think a real sleeper guy in the offense I'm looking forward to in terms of late round flyers. I liked Deontay Hardy. Whenever he was in New Orleans, I always liked him. It was Deontay Harris, changed his name to Hardy. I always liked him over Traquan Smith, but Rashid Shaheed, I think he's going to be a real sleeper coming into next year. He had some moments last season where he was coming up big for the Saints. And I think if Thomas is healthy and Olave is getting a big target share, Derek Carr isn't afraid to throw the ball around, as we've seen throughout his history at quarterback. He's been able to sustain Hunter Renfrow. We saw a year where Tyrell Williams was fantasy relevant. I think Thomas and Olave can be great, but I think we're going to find some weeks where Rashid Shaheed's going to be making some noise.
Yeah, I think like you said, since those Drew Brees days and like what we've had recently with Andy Dalton, Drew Brees at the end of his career, I think we've had this Saints offense where it's a lot of shorter plays, shorter throws, and it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that lines up with kind of how Derek Carr has played, especially last year, because I'm looking at, he's not a great thrower of the deep ball, but he actually does go for it a lot. So he was top 5 in interceptable passes. So he's like, he's risking it for the biscuit, eighth in danger plays.
Devontae's out there somewhere.
Yeah, great. but then you look at that, but he also ranked 5th in money throws, which is what Player Profiler calls a pass requiring exceptional skill or athleticism, as well as critical throws executed in clutch moments. So that's not a stat to sneeze at, honestly.
He doesn't make sense, is what you're telling me.
He goes for it a lot. He puts himself and the team in a dangerous spot a lot, but he does actually hit on a fair amount of them and make some of those plays. So
we're talking about Jameis Winston or Derek Carr. Now I'm confused.
It sounded exact. So I'm curious to see if they think, okay, he's not the safe dink and dunk. I mean, he was second in air yards per attempt last year. Like, he's not just a little dink and dunk guy. Like, he'll go for it if he needs to. And yeah, it might not hit all the time, but you've got some very capable weapons in obviously Olave, who was, near top 10 in a lot of deep ball and efficiency metrics. But also, like you said, Rashid Shaheed really came on at, kind of like a halfway point last year and really flashed a couple games. And we'll see kind of who else they add. I do think, what's his name? Deontay Hardy, the Bills actually gave him like
I love him in
kind
Buffalo.
of significant contract, which they must love something they saw out of him.
Solid return guy, burner. Like, I think it was 2 years ago. He was super useful. He's just a gadget type of dude. You get him the ball, he's going to make something happen. And Rashid Shaheed, congratulations, you are now in that role fully. It's his. He's the definitive wide receiver 3, and that's something where Traquan Smith has been fighting for that for the last 6 years. So congratulations, Rashid. But
now the burning question that would be on everybody's mind: who's going to score more rushing touchdowns within the 10, Jamal Williams or Taysom Hill?
They were actually teammates in college. So I think they're going to flip a coin on the sideline to see who gets there.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, former BYU Cougars.
Wow.
They might not have the draft capital.
Every time they get within the 5, just
rock, paper, scissors. Man.
Even a guy like Juwan Johnson, I mentioned very briefly, but I think I feel like they think that they hit on something a little bit, at least with this oversized wide receiver guy. Like, all right, let's just turn him into a tight end and see what happens. And I think teams try to do that and don't really hit on it at any successful rate. But with the way Juwan Johnson played last year, I'd say that's a pretty decent success in terms of a guy that barely has played that position in his professional career, collegiate career at all. And he just walks into playing it and played it pretty well. So I think they signed him up, gave him a new contract, rewarded him, and we'll see how he kind of factors into that offense as well.
If you combine the totals of Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, you have a tight end 1. The dude had the combination is 800 yards, almost 10 touchdowns. Like, they're going to get production out of the tight end spot. But I agree. I think Juwan Johnson's going to be pretty good this year. And the Saints are going to be fun. They are going to be the fun team in the NFC South. Whereas I see the Panthers are going for it in a way that I don't think they should be. But more power to them. The Bucks are probably just going to throw the towel in after Baker throws his 5th pick in week 3. And then the division's so bad, I forgot the Falcons even existed for about 10 seconds. But at least Arthur Smith has FedEx money. But, yeah, it's the NFC South. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, that's why plan A as Derek Carr for that team makes sense, because that's basically what they need to be able to win that division for at least a year or two by the looks of it right now. And who knows what will happen, especially the Panthers are an interesting team picking at 1 now and going to pick their franchise quarterback. And so I think I want to kick it over to that team next, and who they just signed to be their new wide receiver 1, the Panthers. Adam Thielen, 3 years, $25 million. I don't agree with them viewing him as kind of wide receiver 1 guys yet at this point in his career, but I do think it's looking at that receiving core. You had to do something for your rookie. He was going to be thrown into just the worst situation ever. So I think it makes sense for them to bring someone in like that, and I do think they got to do something else, and they hopefully will, so that whoever they pick. Who do you guys actually think is going to the Panthers?
Will Anderson.
I think it's going to be
just to destroy the entire draft.
It's Joey Porter Jr. They just go cornerback at the first pick. They're like, we're going to have the best secondary ever. No,
man.
I think the most realistic way this pans out is they're going to really make people believe they're taking Bryce Young, which is going to force the Texans to trade up and give them a bit more compensation for the 1. And I think CJ Stroud will be their quarterback unless the Texans say, we don't care, we'll take either of them. I think the Texans really want Bryce Young, and I like CJ Stroud more than Young to a certain extent. I think Stroud is one of the best like pro-ready passers that we've seen in college, at least in this year's draft. I don't know if I'm going to trust the weapons he's coming in with, but in the same vein, I don't think the weapons that the Texans are going to surround their starting quarterback with will be much better than what Stroud will come into here in Carolina. I think Adam Thielen, for all of his greatness, I don't think he was ever truly a wide receiver one at any point in his career. He had 2 seasons where he put up stellar numbers, finishing with almost 1,300 yards back-to-back seasons with like an average of 7 touchdowns. He's always been a wide receiver too.
And that was what, 2017, 2018?
2017,
2018, yeah.
Yep.
And so maybe he could thank
14 touchdowns in 2020.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His touchdown production from the last 3 years, minus this previous year, he was an absolute red zone monster, which is maybe why they bring him in, because I do think they have some talent on this roster in terms of receivers. There's a guy that I'm never going to give up in LaVisca Chenault Jr. just in terms of athleticism that I think one day should translate to maybe being a wide receiver 3. Terrace Marshall Jr. showed flashes at LSU. I think he could finally start getting some usage this year. Shea Smith, it's a flyer at the wide receiver 3, but he's young, and I think he has some talent. So Thielen's a good steadying force for the receiving corps. I'd love to see them add another guy in the draft. I'm not sure they're picking outside of their first overall draft selection. So I'm going to be interested to see what they can do in the later rounds at receiver. I think receiver is pretty solid in this draft. Like, obviously, your top 5 are going to be the best guys you can get. But after them, I don't think there's a massive drop-off from, like, 2nd round to, like, 4th round, depending on who you're taking. Hayden Hurst is a upgrade at tight end for whoever they had last year. So you're going to have a safety blanket. And
don't disrespect Tommy Tremble in my house. How dare you?
And your favorite running back's least favorite fantasy running back, Miles Sanders, now has a new home. If he could be the Miles Sanders from last year, I think he's going to be great. I don't think this offensive line is going to be conducive to being last year's Miles Sanders. But they didn't pay him a mountain of money. He's on a very affordable contract. In terms of the market, like, in a year where people were saying Jacobs got the tag, Saquon got the tag, no running back really got paid this offseason. And I don't think we're going to see a running back get paid for a long time. So there's far worse running backs to have starting than Miles Sanders. There's arguably a lot more that you would rather have as your number one guy in the backfield. But for the first time in what feels like 4 years, the Carolina Panthers are an NFL football team, at least offensively. Because defensively, this team's been ready-made for the last 3 years. They just needed any form of an offense to kind of stabilize them week to week.
They are putting together the most okayest team I've ever seen in my life.
Like, that's some football. I'll tell you that.
That's exactly what I see. Like, 3 years for Adam Thielen feels like a lot at 32. But I think they're taking Stroud for the most part. I don't think they need a guy like Richardson in terms of, like, he had a great combine. But I think just to get like a true passer like CJ Stroud is best for them. They have like I like Adam Thielen to be the wide receiver 1 for like a rookie and the year after maybe. But like I don't know, 3 years feels like a lot. Hayden Hurst is interesting. Miles Sanders is interesting. And by interesting, I mean they're okay. They have a good defense and they're putting together the most okay offense you've ever seen for CJ Stroud. In which reality, okay, might be an NFC South Division title. That's kind of the problem here. I don't love most of the signings, but I get what they're doing. They're kind of doing what Devin was saying earlier with the Texans. Like, throw some money at some dudes, get Stroud going a little bit, and then down the line, they'll probably hopefully have another top 10 pick. At least that would be best for them. Oh, wait, they don't have their pick next year now. Okay. Boy.
This is the thing. I like looking at the moves that have been made for the top 2 teams in this year's draft. They've made identical moves in the micro sense, but over the lifetime of these deals, the Texans are going to come out far better just because the Panthers are giving out years of contracts. Devin Singletary's on a cheap 1-year deal. Hayden Hurst got signed to 3 years. The Panthers are committing to being this mediocre team or this good team, a football team, for lack of better terms.
I think, I mean, they've set themselves up in a good spot in terms of this year, especially where they have a solid defense. They have some really good pieces, like some really good young guys. And so that it's a matter of now taking all those shots on the offensive side and see what they can kind of scramble up with some of these Miles Sanders, the Hayden Hurst, the Adam Thielen, I think if we've seen anything, we can see we've seen okay offenses with much better defenses be able to succeed. I think that was, that's a blueprint for some teams in the past. So, I mean, but I think going back to Thielen, though, I just don't think he's it. Like, I just think yards per route run, that's a metric I kind of like to look at in terms of, efficiency and opportunity, and just it's an indicative stat. And that's gone down for him every year since 2017, which we were just talking about. 2017, 2018, his two best years. He was, top 8 to 10 those 2 years, 2017, 2018. He's dropped and dropped and dropped every single year since, and just had a career worst 1.15 yards per route run, which is really bad, like 88th among wide receivers. So I'm just very, like, he might go the route of, like, not saying at all comparable in talent right now, but Deontay Johnson's year last year, where he's catching he has a ton of targets, catching a good amount of targets, but they're just useless for fantasy. Where, Deontay Johnson, what was he, like top 8 in targets and 40th in fantasy points? Like, how do you even do that? How? And I think that's kind of what we're going to be looking at Thielen. Like, he's getting 12 targets a game. How is he only scoring 7 points? Like, I think that's just kind of how he's going to be at this point. And I think looking at just kind of everything else too, like the numbers kind of tell me it's just like, I think he's past it and he's fallen off. He's in the 80s for yards per target, yards per reception last year. And that was with Kirk Cousins actually giving him the 12th best accuracy rating on targets, which is just something that they give out in terms of how nicely are your balls thrown to you. Like, and we know Kirk Cousins, he'll pretty good at playing it safe and getting it to his main guys. But so it's just telling me, it's not like his target quality fell down or anything. With Justin Jefferson, you'd expect it to be actually really high, with teams having to command that attention over there. And yet he's just still pacing so poorly in a lot of these efficiency metrics. So, and to your point about the touchdowns, I think that's something that he's made his living on for a couple years. And he had 22 red zone targets. That's the 5th most among wide receivers last year, but he had 6 touchdowns, and that's just not cutting it, obviously. So, I mean, it's crazy because he actually ran the 2nd most routes among wide receivers, and he was, you name it, 40th through 50th in every single metrics, QBR per target, fantasy points per target, expected points added, average separation. Like, it was just 46th to 55th. That's where he was sticking in all of these stats. So I think if it tells me anything, it's that, like I said before, like, it's just going to be empty calories at that wide receiver position. Like, unless it's a full PPR, then okay, fine, he might be a wide receiver 3 for you. But it's just one of those things where if Stroud walks in, okay, I've got some hope. But what if they swung for the fence for Anthony Richardson? Then what do we like his odds more right now? No, I don't think we're going to like that at all in terms of his this year fantasy value. So I think there's a lot of unknowns there in terms of, I think Stroud, I agree with you in terms of who's most ready to just step in and actually be pretty serviceable. Like, I think Stroud's probably that guy. But is that who they want? Like, is that what they traded away a lot of their future to do? Or is it to take a guy like Anthony Richardson, who broke every combine record and metric you could think of, or even like Bryce Young, who I think we agree is also a great prospect, but he's undersized, and I don't think he's as ready as someone like Stroud. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see what happens with him. But I'm just not going to have my hopes up there very high with someone who's, in his 30s now and has been declining for a couple of years at this point since his peak. So, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is too is that they should take a guy like Stroud or Young who isn't probably as ready as people would like them to be, but that literally everyone in the top 10 that wants a quarterback should not be trying to swing for the now. Like the Texans aren't ready for the now. The Panthers aren't ready for the now. The Colts could be ready for the now, but the Colts really love Will Levis, and everybody else hates Will Levis, including me. I think Will Levis is going to absolutely set back whoever takes him. But
if the Texans and Panthers aren't ready for the now, isn't that more reason to take someone like Richardson, who's not going to walk in and be very ready now? I just feel like if to put in that much, I like CJ Stroud. I think he's very capable and he'll be like a very solid NFL passer. But you have a guy that, just is a freak. And if you're going to mortgage that much of your future, and you even traded away your best wide receiver, a great wide receiver, DJ Moore's gone. That would have been whatever quarterback you drafted, that would have been his best friend since day one, and he's gone. And so it just really makes me think it's like, okay, maybe they are going to take Anthony Richardson. Maybe they don't feel like they needed to keep DJ Moore for Stroud or Bryce Young because they think Richardson's going to be this dual threat guy. And it's like, I'm just worried about that, honestly, in terms of just anyone on that team fantasy production.
I think a big thing with the Panthers and the Anthony Richardson part of it is because I think Anthony Richardson is going to be a fun NFL player, and I think he's going to be a very solid fantasy asset in his prime. Probably even a really good quarterback. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be the fit of where he's going to be drafted. Because if you look at these dual threat guys, whether it be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these franchises aren't just drafting the gadget. This is not a Terrell Pryor situation where you had this insane athlete that played quarterback. You are drafting them to be your franchise quarterbacks. You have to understand that, yes, it's going to be a process, and you're going to take them in to build the team effectively around them, i.e. Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know if a franchise like Houston or even Carolina at this point has the foresight to be able to step back and say, if we're going in with this guy, we have to basically start from step one. Because if you're not building around that quarterback, then you're never going to get the full potential of what they're going to offer to the team.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can definitely, I see both sides in terms of, as a front office, do you take the shot for the moon and with that expectation that everyone doesn't expect him to be awesome? Maybe it buys you some more time even, right? Yeah. You took that moon shot and might not work year one or year two, but your job is probably safe then because you didn't take a Stroud or a Young and they didn't, they were only average or they were below average. I think there's so many things that go into it that I just, you just have no idea where,
I think the biggest thing with them going to 1 and losing next year's first, I think that disqualified them from taking Richardson because at 9, they could have possibly moved up vertically to 6 or 7. And maybe Richardson goes before that point, but to move up to 1 and give up next year's first along with future capital, that's a move that shows to me you're trying to compete right now, at least for your own division. Because while, yes, you could take Anthony Richardson and not be good this year and basically effectively tank, you're not getting your first round pick next year. There's no reason or incentive for you to be bad. And with every move they've made thus far this offseason, they are a team that is trying desperately to not be bad. And maybe the moves aren't super congruent with their future, but for a 17-game stretch next year where they probably have to win 8 or 9 games to make the playoffs, this is a team that is trying to win. And if they're not, they're just spending money to spend it, and that wouldn't make sense to me either way. So Richardson could totally go on. I think it would be foolish with the moves that they've made thus far because I think they could have swapped with Vegas. They could have moved up to the 5. They could have moved up to 3 with Arizona if they really wanted to, because that price wouldn't have been as steep. I don't think Arizona's anywhere remotely close to shaking the boat and taking a quarterback. They have Kyler. He's injured. That sucks. But there was far more advantageous ways to get an Anthony Richardson, unless, say, Vegas came in over the top and dunked over him to get the first overall pick. But in terms of the landscape, if Anthony Richardson's a Panther, I'm going to like CC an email to Dave Tepper and be like, I don't know what y'all are thinking, but I'm definitely going to have – who's the head coach in Carolina now?
Frank Reich.
I'll have whatever Frank's having because, man – and that's the thing with Stroud too. Like Stroud is the prototypical Frank Reich starting quarterback. He fits all the boxes.
Those things are very valid points. I think I've just been surprised too many times because I didn't consider certain things like would be possible or in the cards with moves they made. And, NFL teams don't always do what the entire rest of the world thinks is the best move for them. So I think it's going to be interesting. And especially these teams that have been just mediocre or bad for years. It's like, well, they got there doing this type of crap. So let's really see what happens. I think they are trying their best to not suck, just signing guys that, are, I'd say, okay to slightly above okay players at their position, like Miles Sanders and Hayden Hurst at least. But it's going to be interesting, I think, next year. And that the race for that division, it's just going to be whew.
Now, what about former Carolina Panther DJ Moore? It's because the more I talk with people about Justin Fields, a lot of people think this is going to be like the run first offense. Justin Fields is going to take the ball a shit ton. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, we're talking about a guy who didn't run in college. We're talking about a guy who threw a lot in college and has a good arm. I think DJ Moore, to set a bar very low, got an upgrade, in team. And I'm going to say he's going to finish top 10, wide receiver 1, this and that. But there was a lot of hype around him last year with Baker Mayfield, and that didn't go very well. But Justin Fields, he has decent contemporaries. Didn't the Bears also sign a tight end? Why can't I think of his name?
Robert Tonyan, big old Bob.
Oh.
Yeah.
Bob never mind. I thought they signed someone better than Bob Tonyan, but yeah, they signed Bob Tonyan. Yeah, you're right.
Don't forget Cole Kmet, man. Put some respect on Kmet's name. He sucked for the first 5 weeks.
Everyone signed that one before last season.
I was like, man, Cole, shout out for showing up, I guess. Put up like 0 points 3 straight weeks. I'm like, I was you were my sleeper this year, my friend.
He was sleeping all right. He was sleeping.
Yeah, he really was. I like DJ Moore. Always have. Not enough to draft him most years because of just the situation in Carolina. He's put up over 100 targets every year since his rookie year. And since year 2, he's put up over 1,000 yards every year besides last year. If he doesn't finish with 130-plus targets next season in the Bears offense, then I don't know football. I don't know if the volume will be there initially, but you don't bring in DJ Moore, who is on an extension, if you're not going to give him the ball. A big problem with Chicago last year, besides their offensive line, was the fact that their weapons were just less than stellar. Darnell Mooney is a solid wide receiver 2 at best, and Chase Claypool is a red zone threat at best at this point. I don't think anybody was going to write home about Velus Jones Jr. last year. I think it's an improvement. I think Fields can be better than Sam Darnold was in stretches. I'd love to believe that he's going to be better than Baker Mayfield was in the Panthers uniform. It just has to get better because DJ Moore wasn't playing with an MVP Cam Newton. DJ Moore's been playing with patchwork at quarterback for the bulk of his career. Will he have a 1,400-yard season? Probably not. But I expect him to inch towards a double-digit touchdown finish. And if he doesn't finish with 1,000 yards, I'm going to be genuinely surprised because he is the number 1 in the offense. And this is an offense now that David Montgomery officially has left. Granted, Deonta Foreman steps right into the fold to pair with Khalil Herbert. They're going to have a good rushing attack. But for the first time in his career, he is the number 1 option on the offense with an above-average signal caller. Regardless of how you feel about Fields' accuracy, the dynamics that he provides to an offense makes DJ Moore that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you make a move like that and without kind of expecting your team to stray more pass heavy. I think they were like league lowest pass rate last year, and I think we saw the greatness that Justin Fields was on the ground, but to that there was definitely some not so great in the air, and I think they're just trying to make these moves to give him guys that are reliable and just someone like DJ Moore who's made it work, like you said, with just any like second tier quarterback you can think of that the Panthers have brought in. Like he's made it work somehow. It's just doesn't matter if it's PJ Walker or Teddy B or whoever it is. Like he's just a very good wide receiver. But I think to that point, he's not Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen. He's not AJ Brown for Hurts. Like I don't think it's a move that's to that level, but I still think it's I mean, it's a great move, a great guy to give a guy like Justin Fields that just needs more reliable pass catchers in that offense. And I think you're spot on with Darnell Mooney. I think he's a wide receiver 2 or 3 on a good team. You know, he's not a true wide receiver 1 by any means. Chase Claypool, I think after year 1, we thought maybe he is a wide receiver 1, and then I'm not quite so sure anymore. I don't think it looks like that, but so that trade was tough. But I think it's a great move overall though, because I mean you look at DJ Moore, he's been in the league 5 years and still only 25, which is wild. But he's a good young guy that if they get that connection, okay, like he's got many years to go with that duo then. And so I mean he's a good reliable guy. I don't expect him to blow up, but I do expect this to be just great in terms of Justin Fields being more a reliable passer, them throwing the ball more. I think it's just showing that that's kind of the direction they're going to go. And I think that makes sense. You don't want Justin Fields rushing 20 times a game and being your entire offense. I think that was not in their best interest to do that.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they've definitely made on the other side of the ball, they've made some kind of weird moves where, you know, obviously they said bye to Roquan and said, okay, like in this day and age, that's just not the position we want to allocate that much money to. And then they went and signed 2 guys that are kind of similar and also just the same amount of money, I guess, together. So, yeah, maybe they can kind of do more than I don't know what they're really doing over there. So they need players all around. We'll see what they can do. But I think, I mean, I'm very optimistic about Justin Fields. And that's not just because he's in my home dynasty league.
It can be. It's more than fine if it is. It definitely can be. But I've definitely let fantasy throw me for a loop at times. Been like, no, I hate this guy because he's burned me 87 times. I'm tired of it.
I mean, it's crazy. But so I want to talk about another guy that signed today. Guy on my hometown. I'm out in Boston, so I'm a Patriots fan. And unfortunately, the last few years, but you know, we had our fun. I'm not complaining. But Damian Harris just went to the rival, division rival, and obviously contending Bills team. And I couldn't actually figure out how much. There was no report about the amount of money he signed for when I checked, at least, because this was, you know, an hour or 2 ago. But I thought it was a really interesting signing. I mean, I don't know. I think this is good news in terms of I don't think they're going to bring in another high. I mean, at least in terms of James Cook and people kind of still holding out on that value. Like, I think there were some rumors that, you know, Leonard Fournette might be coming. Ezekiel Elliott might be someone they look at because they finally want to just, you know, bring in someone that can shoulder that load in the run game. And I think this is a type of move that kind of shows like they don't really want to do that. That's just not who they are. And they're going to continue taking a shot at someone like Nyheim Hines and paying him like $7 million a year. It's just like, so, I mean, I think it's kind of telling that they sign someone like this, and probably not for like just $1 million or two, I'm assuming. But I mean, if Devin Singletary got one for almost $4 million, I'd assume Damian Harris is getting somewhere in that ballpark. But I when I dug into the numbers, I mean, I know he didn't have a great year last year, but I was really disappointed, honestly. Like, just as a Patriots fan too, I was just like, yeah, like he was so great to not this past season, but the year before. I think on the back of a ton of touchdowns, and I'm glad Ramondre is now the lead dog. But I think I was pretty kind of surprised by, something like he had the second highest percentage of carries with a light front, so six or fewer defenders, right? And he's still just 4 yards, 2 yards per carry. It's like 29th. It's like, all right, like you literally have this, you're getting the second most amount of carries among anyone, or second highest percentage of carries among any running back in the league, against just not a stacked front like a lot of these other running backs. They know, like, and it's just like, it was disappointing. And another one that was really disappointing for me was EPA. It's just something I like to look at, just because it kind of tries to quantify, the expectation versus what really happens, and how valuable that team or how they're playing, or what player is really providing the most based on expectation. And he was minus 12.2 in expected points added, which was a good for 120th. So that was, I was pretty
right there.
He's ready for the breakout.
Disappointing. And like, you look at other things, it's all kind of the same. Like expected fantasy points, if we're looking at it, now looking at fantasy wise, like expected fantasy points 8.9, his actual fantasy points 8.3. So he wasn't even hitting that. Like, he wasn't expected to get a ton, but he was still not even reaching that number and that threshold. And I think the biggest thing last year, I think, aside from all the touchdowns, and obviously he was hurt for a couple games, but the biggest difference was, I think, his explosiveness, where in 2021 he was at almost 7% of his carries were 15 plus yards. They call that breakaway run, his breakaway speed. He was there. In 2021, like, that was eighth in the league in 2021. And then this past year, he was at a 3.8%, which is almost 40th. So, and that's just the rate. So we're accounting for, the games he missed and the time he missed, the lack of overall plays he had, but still, it just seemed like he had lost a little step, lost a little edge, and it was clear Ramondre had become our lead guy. And so, I mean, I think it's interesting for the Bills, because you kind of know what he is. He's not going to add anything in the receiving game, really. I mean, he got like 20 passes for us over the whole time he was here. And so I don't know. I think it's just particularly interesting to me in terms of just like, he's signing over at a team we're going to have to see now twice a year. What if he actually becomes a big piece of that offense, and he's the running back that team has actually been looking for? And now I won't say I'm not going to completely discount that, but I hope it's not true. And for that reason, I was glad to kind of see some of these poor efficiency metric numbers.
Yeah, it's not a goodbye, Damian. It's see you never. I do think the Damian Harris to Buffalo could be interesting, just because Josh Allen is effectively one of the most dangerous red zone weapons in the NFL. I think Damian Harris might actually see some ample usage in the red zone to kind of throw teams off the scent of those Josh Allen keepers and sneaks. He's in the best situation I could see for him. I heard some people reporting he was thinking about waiting to sign after the draft to be sure that, like, he doesn't get signed to a team that's going to draft some guy to eat touches. I think he's carved in a role where he's going to have 10 to 12 carries a game, unless James Cook fully breaks out. But I think the roles are going to be pretty determined. You're going to have James Cook in the receiving role until he were to break out, if he does. But Harris should be what he was in New England, with, I think, a bit more upside baked in, just because of his size compared to James Cook in terms of being like a goal line running back.
Yeah, I think I think this deal is fine for both sides, and we talked about it every single time last year even when the Bills were winning, is that we couldn't have Josh Allen be the leading rusher of the Bills. They needed a decent rushing attack, and Singletary had a decent year last year. James Cook looked okay last year, and like you said, Damian Harris ain't catching passes. That's going to be James Cook's job, and Nyheim Hines is going to be watching on the sidelines and returning punts, I guess. I don't know. But I think Devin hits it on the head where he'll be in that red zone to take it away from Josh Allen. He basically needs to be what Josh Allen is, kind of just running through the tackles and pushing your way for a couple yards to get those last few sneak yards. And I think that's perfect. I think it keeps years on Josh Allen rather than get blasted every other play. So I think the signing is fine for both. They've needed a running back for a while. James Cook is going to take all the passing downs, whether it be second or third down. And Damian Harris, like Devin said, 10 to 12 carries a game. It's going to be fine. He'll get 6-7 touchdowns, maybe, I would say, in a 17-game stretch. Maybe a few more if he's basically Jordan Howard in a nutshell. I mean, that's kind of what we need him to be. We need him to be Jordan Howard. Just push for a few yards, get 3 carries for -2 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like the best stat line you've ever seen. But yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's good for New England to move on from him because Ramondre Stevenson is that dude in life and in fantasy. Devin loves Ramondre Stevenson.
Dude, it's Steven season, my guy. I'm taking him everywhere I can. Yeah. I love Stevenson.
So I think it's fine for everybody across the board. The Patriots, Harris, the Bills. It's a decent signing as long as the money isn't too much whenever we find out what the money is. But like you said, if Singletary got a year for what, $4.5 million, if that, Damian Harris should be around the same.
Up to 3.7.
Yeah. So
I think the biggest thing for me, this feels in terms of upside similar to how James Conner went out to Arizona on like a 1-year deal and had an absolutely insane year. I don't think Harris has it within him to have the complete ceiling of what James Conner did, but I think the groundwork is there based upon his previous usage. Like in 2021, whenever he put up almost 1,000 yards with 15 scores, Buffalo's going to put up points, and somebody has to score the touchdowns. And outside of Stephon Diggs on that roster, there's not going to be a whole lot of guys that I can trust week over week to get into the end zone like that. But Harris is a guy that's been there. So I don't know if it's going to translate. Who knows? It might. Maybe James Cook comes out and pulls Ramondre Stevenson 2.0. He's a little undersized for that to happen, but maybe Harris is just unlucky, but he put himself in the situation to get paid because offenses that score points tend to need somebody to score those points.
Yeah, I like that analogy where, it's kind of like James Conner walking in with Chase Edmonds, that pass catching back, they're already there. And so, I mean, obviously James Conner got some receptions in terms of, a fantasy boost, but I like kind of like that comp in terms of it's just kind of the system they're in and the opportunities they're walking into, because I do think, I mean, if he plays well, like he has the opportunity to actually lead the backfield for sure. It's just, are they going to use him in a way that the Pats never did and, actually toss him a few balls here and there? And I think that's going to be interesting to see because, I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I thought one last thing about him, like I think you mentioned that he wanted to potentially wait until after the draft. So I think that's interesting in terms of from the team, if they, maybe they told him like, no, we promise you, we're not going to take a day 1 or 2 running back. Like we know, like everyone's linking us to every running back, like whatever, but like
we're moving
we'll
up
give
for
you that
Bijan.
shot. Like, yeah, like we'll give you the shot. And like, cause I mean, they don't need Bijan to be a great team. They're already almost there. It's like they need someone that's actually capable. And it's actually kind of funny because like some of these numbers that I referenced in terms of Damian Harris's numbers, which were, that expected points added, which was really gross, and the breakaway run rate that really dipped after one solid year in 2021. But I was actually surprised to see, I don't know if you knew, but Devin Singletary, 11th highest breakaway run rate last year at 7.3%. And so
he
that
had
was
a career year,
almost double of Damian Harris last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just funny to me. I mean, and Devin Singletary, like he ran the 8th most routes among running backs. Like that's, are they going to commit all that to James Cook now? Like, it's going to be interesting because, obviously, like we said, Damian Harris isn't going to catch that many balls unless, who knows? But so I think that's really, it's an interesting signing. He has the potential to, if he actually plays well, actually carve out being, that first and second down and basically taking all that work on those 2 downs at least, and in terms of rushing perspective. But his numbers and his metrics kind of say that he's not that great. And I think that's pretty spot on. I think he was really good for us, and even in fantasy he was pretty solid, but he had, what did he have, 15 touchdowns in 2021? Like I think that really just fueled that finish and that good year. So I think I understand it, and I get the fit from a point of if they really expect James Cook to be able to contribute more than that. We'll see.
With that, I'm going to contribute sleep to my brain. We're going to go ahead and get on out of here. I just want to say, first and foremost, Conan, thanks for hanging out with us for an hour.
Yes, thank you.
Let people know where they can find you, what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. Love just chopping it up anytime I can. And so, you can find me down here, like it says somewhere, one stat one day on Twitter. I'll get used to that someday. But you can find me over on Twitter at one stat one day, like I said. But we got, if you know me on there, I do my ridiculous splits and different streaks of different stats. So come hop in, guess an answer. You might even, get that gold medal emoji that I give out to the first person. And but aside from that, I do actually plan on launching a podcast, and hopefully the next week or two. I've gotten a lot of the foundation kind of set up for it, and just a matter of kind of getting that fully launched, down recording a couple things, and really, actually getting it out there. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I'll definitely be writing all about it on Twitter when that happens. But I appreciate you guys for having me on, like I said, and great to chop it up.
Yeah, and as always, you can find, well, if you're here, you already know where to find us. So if you're already here, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment, all that jazz. If you found us, you probably found us through Twitter, so you know to find us there. But it's right there. There we go. One of these, yeah, it's like always one of those. So as always, we're here every Monday night, 6:30 Pacific time, because we are dirty West Coasters. That's all I got. Devin?
Shout out to everybody that came onto the show to listen and watch. Thank you again for coming on, Conan. I'm looking forward to hearing your podcast whenever that does hit the airwaves. So I'll keep my ears peeled.
Thank you.
But everybody stay safe. Everybody stay healthy. Get some sleep. And Austin, I think it's time to leave them with the word of the day, right?
Always.
Peace.